like this? A little bit like this. Hello, everybody. A little administrative before we get started. You get CPE credits for this session, so if you haven't had your badge scanned, go get your badge scanned, because those CPEs are really hard to come by, and for those of us who have our certifications, this is an easy win. So make sure you do your job, get back there. If you haven't done it yet, just wait until we're done talking, though. Thank you. All right, so I'm Tara Lemieux. I'm here to talk to you about real threats. And when I say real threats, I don't mean necessarily threats to businesses at a very, kind of static level. I'm talking about down into the trenches of threats. And for those who don't know who I am, if you could advance this slide, please. Is there a clicker? Oh, thank you. So you can't defend today's network with yesterday's mindset and expect to be in business tomorrow. That's my quote. I'm the chief troublemaker. And by that I mean is we kind of have developed this fixed view. And when I use the term fixed view, I'm talking about one of the precepts in Buddhism, right? I'm a Buddhist, sorry. You have to learn this about me. And fixed view means that sometimes we look so closely at something that we forget to open our eyes to everything else. And hopefully this presentation will help you kind of understand what the threats are that are out there. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. Is this my clicker? Okay. All right, so a little bit about me. I worked primarily in national security field for 35 years. Most of you know me as the CMMC Queen on LinkedIn, or if you want to call me a princess, you may. I have been doing compliance for many, many years, but over the last 10 years, my focus has been working with federal agencies to understand how these threats could potentially impact their mission, their operations. And so when I talk about those, let me go back. When I talk about those threats, we're talking about, again, looking at things with a fresh set of eyes, making sure that we're not becoming too complacent in how we're evaluating these threats. And for maybe the last 10 years too, I have done some work with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, which was a really wild ride. I don't recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart, but in that capacity, I was infiltrating a lot of the terrorist groups and looking at what technology they were using, what tools were they going to in order to gain access to our information systems and networks. So why are we here? Part of this conference is about CMMC, but we would be remiss if we didn't talk about hacking and really the threat that could potentially be exposed in a nanosecond of our time. And a lot of the devices that we're seeing, for example, the OMG cable, if anyone is familiar with that, I have some up there and I'll show you a little bit later. But the OMG cable looks like a regular USB cable. From the casual observer looking at this device, you would never know that it contains a microcomputer, and that microcomputer can automatically detect the operating system that it's being plugged into. It will tailor those payloads in order to execute those attacks. So if I plug that into an Apple iPhone, for example, it knows that I now have an iOS, and it now knows to select the payloads that are attributable to that iOS. That can be very dangerous, right? Because what that does is it really kind of opens the field for all of us. People who may not have the technical skills to be a hacker, to be able to do any damage. We're now seeing devices that make it so easy as downloading or cloning from GitHub and executing locally or through the networks. By the numbers, and I have to apologize, I need to squeeze forward here, we have seen an increase in strategic attacks in our ecosystem, not just based on the type of information and data that we would expect them to be trying to exfiltrate. They're hitting agencies that we would never even think about, like why healthcare? Why is healthcare such a big target right now? And when I, in my capacity with the FBI JTTF, saw a Russian hacker posting videos of him going through the files, the medical files of one of our FBI agents, that put it in perspective for me, right? Because now you see what the threat is. Now we start looking at medical files, we start thinking about, is this person a target? Is this person a target, and are there any vulnerabilities that we could deploy against that person in order to either coerce them or to physically incapacitate those individuals? And with medical institutions now being attacked, we now look at medical devices, right? Implantable medical devices. Now we know that those devices are, of course, hackable. Every device is hackable if you have enough time and patience, and someone like me or some of the others in this crowd who will sit down and try and figure it out, reverse engineer it, you can absolutely connect to that. We've also seen a huge rise in espionage cases, and I'll get to that in a little bit too. But from 2022 to present, there have been 25 cases where where there have been indictments that were resulting from espionage activities in which that person faced and was convicted and imprisoned. So 25 cases. Pete, you've known me for years now. At the NSA, we saw maybe one case every 2 or 3 years, right? But for some reason now, there's thirst for this information. And you know us Americans, we're all connected. Everything's connected. We plug everything in, right? But now there are tools out there. Those tools like the Wi-Fi Pineapple. The Wi-Fi Pineapple, I can just sit in a little corner of my office, and within 2-mile radius, I can figure out all of the connected devices that are being shared, right? Most of them are default password. The rest of them don't have the cyber controls in place that would be able to prevent a type of attack. So who cares, right? We'll get into that. You've probably seen a lot of ransomware in the news lately, right? Ransomware is big business. Where do you think that money is going, right? Where do you think, why would a nation state actor be engaged in that type of activity, and where would those funds potentially benefit? Well, if you're state-sponsored, it makes sense that that could be used for munitions. It could be used for terrorist attacks, right? And now we have the cryptocurrency. Makes it a lot harder, but not impossible, to trace. And of course, our critical infrastructure. Man, they're hitting us where it hurts. We have water treatment facilities where they're logging directly into the mechanisms that are able to control the chemicals and the composition of those chemicals that are going into our water, the water that we drink, that our kids drink, right? So I know it's not CMMC, but it is, right? The CMMC is here because of stuff like this, right? When you have an entire power grid that goes down because a hacker was able to bypass security fairly easily, you know, this is what brings us here today. And so CMMC for some is a certification. It's a gateway to get you new contracts in business. But for the rest of us, there are real lives at risk here. And that's why this stuff is important. All right, so critical infrastructure, again, hospitals and healthcare. We saw the Change system, or Change Healthcare, was hacked. That resulted in a lot of people's personal medical information being shared in the dark web. And when I say the dark web, I'm not talking about, you know, trying to find something on an onion site. You can go to a clear kind of website. Breached forums is one. RAID forums before we took them down. But they're all out there. It's just a Google search away. And then the energy grids themselves, right? So when we're looking at the impact on our power and our infrastructure, why would a state-sponsored actor be interested in potentially disrupting all of those capabilities? those services for our people. It's because they know that if they do this, they're creating chaos. What happens when we have chaos? We start not trusting one another. And let me tell you, there's been a lot of not trusting everyone over the last 6, 7 years. Knock it off. We have to unify. Don't laugh. We have to unify, right? Our adversaries play the long game. They have been infiltrating our defense contractors, our universities, our agencies, our federal agencies. They've been waiting. The last one that I saw, he was hired 10 years ago. Gentleman from the PRC. He had moved here, established his citizenship, and he was able to, without even, making a little bit of a ripple in the water, exfiltrate so much data on our nuclear submarines. Why are we not catching this? So I won't go into too much because we are a little time constrained, and I'm so sorry. But here's a good example of one of the critical impacts that we realized, the Colonial Pipeline. Who remembers the Colonial Pipeline? What happened during that attack? We had disruption in our fuel supply, right? And what is the impact of that overall? Well, truckers, they rely on fuel to be able to do what they do, right? So our prices go up. All of this sowing of chaos, again, leads to instability. And from a national security perspective, any amount of instability, any amount of distrust is damaging to our ability to defend our nation. Texas power grid was another example. In this case, hackers were able to use a combination of spear phishing and also their knowledge of the systems itself, and they gained access very easily. A lot of these, like the different industries, they're not all at the DoD level, and we're still catching up to industry. But a lot of these facilities have legacy systems, outdated security controls. They also have an inability really to practice the basics. I was talking to my friend earlier today about, how when we would enter and exit the field station in Hawaii, we were physically patted down. They looked through every page of our notebook to make sure we hadn't written anything, captured any notes, put anything in there that could potentially be damaging. But I think our discipline maybe has kind of gotten away from us a little bit. And now today. So again, going back on my experience with the JTTF, let me tell you, cyber warfare is the preferred method of attack. In many ways, the battlefield is here. They don't even have to deploy tanks, weapons, anything like that. All they have to do for them to be successful in deploying their attack, do a little recon and pull on both sides, which is what we're seeing over the last, however many years. And I don't want to get into politics. It's not about politics. It's about the United States. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I served for 7 years. I spent 35 years in national security. Everything to me is about the mission. And we never really allowed ourselves to become divided as we are today. And today, we are so divided. We need to really start remembering, is this a tactic of misinformation, right? What other mechanisms are they using to divide us? So AI-driven attacks, how many saw the CISA bulletin about the use of AI in exploiting our information systems and networks, right? How many follow me on LinkedIn? How many saw my video with the AI voices, right? Pretty creepy, right? I was creeped out, and it's me standing up there talking, from a beautiful view. But it's still something that can be done so effortlessly that it changes the way that we approach this. So nowadays, before we have to worry about hackers kind of plugging in and ticking away at a computer, kind of like Mr. Robot, but it's not like that anymore. We have coalitions of hackers from all around the world. Russia-backed, PRC-backed. Has anyone heard of dark eyes? So dark eyes are the Five Eyes equivalent, but they're there for a more nefarious purpose. Russia, China, North Korea, and so forth. And these actors are using every tool in their toolbox, including AI. AI-powered intelligence gathering, right? They have the ability to deploy a bot now on social media. That bot can appear to be human, and they've trained it using their LLMs to be able to respond to sentiment, right? To detect the sentiment and respond to it. So they can adjust, the AI can adjust its tempo, its cadence, and its tone when it's speaking to you. That's pretty scary. Russia influence campaigns have been very, very incessant over the last several years, especially. Ultimately, though, what we're seeing is that they're manipulating our dialogue, our national dialogue. I saw in the newspaper that there were over 60 phone-in bomb threats to election polling sites throughout the United States during this last election. Those calls, allegedly, because we have to go through the process, are being tied back to Russia. Now, not to get all Russia, 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 but look, you know, if we know there's some threat towards us and we don't acknowledge it as such, then we're doing a disservice to everyone. So why do people attack? There's political and ideological motivators, right? So a lot of these conversations, these different dialogues that you saw online, so the Israel versus Gaza, a lot of that was motivated through bot networks, and we know that that kind of divide was drawn there. And again, you know, the methodology here is if I start a fire in your backyard, you're not going to be worried about what I'm doing in the home front. And that's what these are intended to do. Espionage. Again, 25 cases of espionage. No, 28, sorry, there were 3 more. That involved people with SCI clearances, the majority of which were either military, active duty, or veterans. They were defense contractors. One of them was a wife, a doctor at the VA. And they were sharing critical information, patient records, schematics for our weapons systems. Why is this happening? Why over the last few years have we seen such a drastic spike in espionage cases? People are feeling motivated, right? It's their, you know, what they feel that they're destined to do. And in many cases, right, that's all they need to take action. So again, social media, I don't even go on it much anymore except for LinkedIn because, you know, I got to keep in touch with my Army brothers and all the others. But it's something that you really should really take a moment to consider is, am I being played? All right, I want to talk a little bit about concealed devices. And I'm going to step down here. I know I'm short, so I'm going to show you, what is this? Is it? You want to pass it around, look at it? I want it back. Looks pretty much like this one, right? Except this one's longer. Would you be able to tell that that had a microcomputer inside of it? That I could execute a payload from miles away, right? What's different about that cable than any other cable? And ultimately, it's almost indiscernible. So when people are entering into your contractor facilities, are you checking for stuff like this? No. I got some other tools too. But these concealed devices, I got another one. Well, I'll bring it up later. The USB keys. How many use USB keys in their organization? Oh, come on, be truthful. Are you saying NA because you don't want to have it on your assessment? It's the easy NA? No, okay. I'm making a joke. USB keys are the easiest way to gain access to your information systems. I have a USB ducky. If you want to see it later, you can just tap me out in the hallway. It's indiscernible from another USB key, but again, if I plug that into anybody's information systems, I can do reconnaissance, I can do surveillance, I can do very targeted, sophisticated attacks, and I can do it in stages. So stage 1, create a little skirmish, wait, do a little bit more. And all of that is so easy to execute, I don't even have to be present. Hey, John Smith, I'll give you $2,000 if you take this into work. Just plug it in. That's all you have to do is plug it in. But that's what we're seeing now. So these devices, and I've got a few, I'm sure everybody has seen the flipper, right? Right? TikTok made this famous. But damn it, TikTok, because you just showed the world how to use this mechanism to do things like brute force attacks, to maybe bypass the gates at the paid parking. Not saying I did that, though it is exorbitant price there. And you can buy them online. These are so easy to buy online. They're less than $100 now. And I can do Bluetooth attacks. Who knows what a Bluetooth attack is? Bluetooth attack, right? So if I use this and I try to send a payload through Bluetooth, I'm going to target your device. Would you think that turning your phone off or turning the Bluetooth off would be a good solution, not to be subjected to that kind of attack? No. No, and I'll prove it to you later after the session. Bluetooth doesn't have to be on for me to access your Bluetooth and to send that payload. You know, and I'm happy to show anyone proof. I'll show it to you after the session. But again, are these readily available devices making it easier for hackers and for people who would never even be inclined to do this to take up and be motivated by some theological or ideological motivator, or political motivator to do? Who knows what this is? Don't look at the screen. And please don't comment on my crappy craftsmanship. It's a little bulky. This is the most dangerous hacking device, hands down, in the world right now, aside from maybe Mr. Robot. But we don't have a Mr. Robot. With this device, I can receive, transmit, collect. I can do surveillance. This is, my inner E.W. Sigint girl is just alive when I turn this on. Because anything from 1 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, if it's got a signal, I can access it with this device. What else can I do with this device? I can put up ghost fleets of planes, right? I can interrupt signal from the air traffic to the plane themselves, right? I can really wreak havoc with air traffic. What happens when we start seeing air traffic issues? Oh, there's somebody hacked it, right? People are not going to want to take planes. I can tell you I don't take a plane anymore. But any signal, anything that has a signal, you can jam it, make it so that those signals can't get to where they're intended to. So if we're talking about emergency services, that's a huge hit. Can you imagine what January 6th would have looked like if we would have had these devices? I could have sat in a crowd. I could have blocked all police scanners just by pressing a button. I'd be in jail now, but I mean, I could do it. We can even monitor ship-to-shore communications with that device, right? So a lot of satellite signal interception. We never had these toys when I was a little kid, right? Now they're right here, and they're so easy to use. This one really bothers me. That's a smart bulb. You see it? I pulled that down from one of my VA medical appointments. They were using it in the patient rooms to adjust the lighting because there was a study that said different shades of lighting can influence an individual and get them to kind of relax and be more open to treatment. But I don't know if you can see it. This little wire sticking down here, that's a microcontroller. It's an ESP32. I was able to take this apart, and I was able to flash firmware onto that device, put it back together, install it, and I had a network surveillance. Any information that was transiting, I was able to capture on my own network, of course, because I don't like having to talk to the police. But can you imagine that we don't control things like that? Are we asking about smart bulbs when we go to do our CMMC assessments? How many do? Who's an assessor in here? Right, okay, a few of us. Do you check for stuff like this? We should be. IoT, right? What do we do with IoT? We have to control it. We have to test it. We have to make sure we understand how it works. And you probably should start taking them apart too, because this little device was $20, it's cheap, and the VA was using it. So now I have to write a report to the VA and explain why you shouldn't be using these bulbs. So some of the threats to the United States, of course, we've talked about this a little bit, and I don't want to take on your time, Beth, but ultimately, we have counterfeit devices that we're seeing. We're seeing cyber espionage activities unlike any we've seen before. If you go into Telegram, if you want to wade into the hacker groups on Telegram, they're dumping our top secret data daily. Every major prime that I've ever thought, oh, well, they've got their stuff together. I don't want to say any names, but I've seen their stuff, their design specifications, their technical specs, all available freely, just to download. So getting back to my original point, and I'm so sorry, Beth, I'm going to wrap it up. Can today's thinking keep up with tomorrow's threats? No. I think for us to be successful as a nation, we need more people that are like myself or others like you who are willing to kind of play around with this technology and show people who are actually in business with the Department of Defense, with the NSA, with the Pentagon, so that they know how to start looking for this type of information, these types of devices, and these TTPs, really. So the danger of fixed view, again, that Buddhist mindset of mine, if we keep looking at the same thing over and over again, and we have such, Billy Connolly is one of my favorite comedians, and he likes to say, most people will spend their entire lives looking through the wrong end of the telescope. So we're kind of looking through the fat end to the tiny little pinpoint when we should be looking from the other end, outward. What are our threats? What are the risks, right? We need to be continually asking ourselves this kind of information, these kind of things. So compliance drives innovation, right? Yeah, we know that. But it's not just about passing your assessment. Your assessment is just one small piece of an overall bigger picture. Because let me tell you, not getting your certification is lesser of the impacts than having your company's reputation, ruined in one headline about how you've been hacked and the impacts of those hacks, right? Especially if the downstream is to our military and our soldiers, our war fighters. So CMMC compliance, it's not just about meeting standards, it's about creating a fortress that can be impenetrable, and it's one smaller aspect of that. It's not the full picture. All right, I'm going to hand this over to Beth, but this QR code, if you know, I've written a book. Feel free to scan. You can actively scan and download a free copy, and I see about 10 or so. Right, so. Do we trust to scan your QR code? No. There you go. never, ever, 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 ever scan QR codes without, a first connection. What did you see on your screens, anyone? Huh? Your device information, if it's scanned correctly. Your device information and a message about don't scan QR codes because she's a hacker and she's going to take all your stuff. Right. I will give you free copies of my book, though, by the way. If you just want to, connect with me afterwards, just send me your email, and I'm happy to share those with you. That's the end of my time, I think. I want to make sure that I hand this over to my counterpart, Beth Ball, with Cytorus. Beth has an amazing second half to this presentation. But if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can always just reach out to me. I take that, that seriously. I want to help. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.